And welcome back to All Day Live. We're glad that you're with us. We are covering the big news of the day here locally, which is Governor Walz deciding that he is not running for a third term. And there's been a lot of reaction online. We saw this video. It was a TikTok of this morning. The governor and his daughter Hope sending this out. He talks about what he hopes to accomplish now during his final year in office. Do we want to play that out, or what do you want? Yeah, I think we have a soundbite of that. Okay, let's play that for a second.
By the time this video comes out, everybody will know that Tim is no longer running for governor, but he still has a year on the job and is going to give it his all and do a lot of amazing things. And I just wanted to let Tim talk to you guys.
Hey everybody, glad to always get Hope home. Beautiful January day, beautiful run. We'll do a few miles. Just wanted to say how grateful I am to everybody out in Minnesota. Grateful for the 7 years and the year that's coming up to make Minnesota better. We're feeding our kids. We're lowering childhood poverty. We're addressing climate change. We started paid family and medical leave, the best in the country. And we treat our neighbors with respect and welcome people to this state. I need to focus on getting this job done. It's very clear that that's not the focus of the White House. They do not care about Minnesota. It's about making Minnesota meaner and colder and just less friendly. So I'm going to focus on this. Rest assured, Democrats will win this seat. They will keep a progressive agenda. We will keep fighting against this White House and these unconstitutional acts. But I just want to say my gratitude for Minnesota. I never ran to get this job. I ran to do the job. And I want to do that job right now. And this means I get to spend more time with Hope, more time adventuring.
We're going to take some fun trips. We're already talking about it. And I'm just getting started. I am now being let loose because of this, people. So good luck, Donald Trump and all the Republicans, because you have not seen the last of me or him, to be quite honest.
All right, more reaction now from the GOP side of things. Brian McClung is CEO of McClung PR and former Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Tim Pawlenty, among other things. Thank you for joining us.
You bet. Good to see you, Amy.
Good to see you. So, Brian, what was your reaction when you heard that the governor was dropping out?
Well, this is really interesting because it was that rare combination of surprising and inevitable. It was something I think that caught a lot of people off guard, that Governor Walz was announcing right now that he wasn't going to seek a third term. But at the same time, it did also feel inevitable because you had this drip, drip, drip of fraud coming to light in Minnesota. And I think it's clear, I think every Minnesotan recognizes that that story is not over. That, you know, there could be in the neighborhood of $9 billion worth of fraud, as mentioned by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's going to continue to come out over the weeks and months ahead. And so I think as it became clear that it was very difficult for Governor Walz to kind of turn the corner on that, try to run for re-election while dealing with and managing this increasing amount of fraud that's happened in Minnesota, I think that's when it became inevitable, when he recognized that he really just did not have a clear path to try to run a campaign. I think there were lots of Democrats who then came to him and said, this is not tenable. This is not going to work in this election year. We want you to make another choice.
As part of this, the conversations with the DFL, does Governor Walz pick the replacement, or how much of a hand does he have in that?
No, I don't think so. You know, I don't think he really has a say, nor I don't know that he would want to, right? I think, as he said in that video with his daughter, he's sort of focused on trying to get the job done now, get this fraud situation under control. You know, what I would advise the governor to do is, he has that new fraud czar, Tim O'Malley, who I know he was actually appointed by Governor Pawlenty to lead the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension when I worked for Governor Pawlenty. So Tim O'Malley is a good, solid person for that job. He has a background with the FBI. He has taken on lots of difficult tasks over the years. I think Tim Walz should make Tim O'Malley his new lieutenant governor, in a sense. Be with him all the time, every day, not be afraid to dive in and not be afraid to expose more and show what's actually happened here. And again, I think that's part of his rationale in deciding to step down from running is you're going to see this fraud numbers just pile up over the coming weeks and months. As far as, who's running now and what's happening, I mean, all of the speculation is around Senator Klobuchar, as I'm sure you've been talking about today. And, she is probably the most popular politician in Minnesota. So if Senator Klobuchar decides to run for governor, she certainly clears the Democratic side of the field, or would likely, maybe she would have a nominal challenge from the further left parts of their party. But I think she would most likely be the Democratic candidate, and is in a pretty strong position. I mean, I think there are a lot of Republicans who might think, well, I guess we got what we hoped for, which is always not great. They're glad Tim Walz is out, but now they don't have Tim Walz to run against and to tag with everything that's been happening.
Well, and I'm interested, according to our reporting too, the conversations have been had between the Walz camp and the Klobuchar camp, although no decision has been made yet. If Senator Klobuchar does move forward, we just heard the governor in this TikTok with Hope saying that he's confident a Democrat will be governor, and he said we'll keep a progressive agenda. If a Senator Klobuchar were to become governor, does she keep a more progressive agenda, or does she need to shift a little bit to a more moderate platform to appease that's been her secret to success, really, has been able to sort of appease both, right?
Yeah, I mean, she is recognized and regarded as more of a centrist or moderate Democrat. Certainly more so than where Tim Walz finds himself on the political spectrum these days. I don't think that she would be inclined to change that, right? It's been very successful for her. She's been in elected office for these past 20 years. Actually a little more than that. She won the U.S. Senate race in 2006 when Governor Pawlenty was reelected as governor. They both, had a statewide Republican, statewide Democrat who both won in that election year. She served 4 years as the Hennepin County attorney prior to that. So I don't think she'd be inclined to change that. I think it would it be a progressive agenda or not? You'd have to judge it by the direction she takes it in. Then I think, though, that Republicans are not going to give up on this, right? This is not like, well, it's Amy Klobuchar's, have at it. I think Republicans are going to make the case that you can't trust another Democrat to come in and fix a problem that Democrats have made. And that the fraud situation in Minnesota has been building certainly over these last few years in the Walz administration, but also when Mark Dayton was governor. And if you remember, some of the early cases of fraud go back to the CCAP, the child care program in Minnesota, and there were problems with fraud in CCAP all the way back to 2014. So you've had, now almost 16 years of Democrats in the governor's office. And the question is, do you feel comfortable continuing that in light of what we see happening and the fraud situation that Minnesota has just become, just a national conversation. And a lot of people in Minnesota, we kind of think like, well, our taxes are high, but it's okay because we get good value and we have good schools and we take care of one another. And now it's like our taxes are high and the money's getting stolen and you're not getting good funding and our schools are not better than the other states. And so I think it's this conversation that will unfold during this election year. It's different than the conversations we've had over the last few elections.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about here, Brian. I look forward to a lot of conversations with you in the coming year. I guess my last question to you is, who did the Republicans put forward? Who can win this?
Well, from my take, I think both Speaker of the House Lisa Demuth and State Representative Kristen Robbins are very accomplished, strong candidates who could make the argument, win back, especially independent suburban women that Republicans have been losing with. Republicans are losing the statewide races in the second and third ring suburbs. Places you think of like Edina, Eden Prairie, Eagan, Woodbury, those places used to vote for Republicans, voted for my boss, Tim Pawlenty, and haven't been since then. So they've got to win those back. I think both of those candidates who are running are very solid. My concern is that the Republican base and activists would say, well, Mike Lindell is going to be the bomb thrower that we want. He's going to, bring in kind of a Trump-style approach. And while that might seem fun to them, I don't think that is a winning path in a general election in Minnesota. So I'm hopeful that Republican activists and Republican primary voters are going to look at this as a unique opportunity to try to win. We've got an open governor's race, an open U.S. Senate race, and they'll be a little more pragmatic as they think about it.
All right, Brian McClung, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for the connection to your former boss, who will be joining us tomorrow. Former Governor Tim Pawlenty will be joining us to talk a little bit about the big news today. So thanks for your time. It was good to see you.
You bet. Anytime. Good to see you.
Take care.